Yeah, Q&A. It's such an interesting one, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I think a lot of leaders really struggle in the Q&A stage of either doing a keynote speech or, if they're presenting to senior leaders are going to strip your ideas apart. They're going to ask tough questions. And a lot of people tend to crumble, number one, because of how pressure is really built up, and number two, because of the lack of actual preparation. We've got to go, if we're going to go into a critical meeting where we know that we're speaking to senior leaders, senior stakeholders, big decision makers, they're going to ask questions, hands down. There's no way they're not going to ask questions. And we've got to ask ourselves is, firstly, we've got to understand the different personalities that are in the room. If you've got somebody who's quite amenable, they'll like to have a conversation and talk to you. If you've got somebody who's quite analytical and they're technical, they're going to ask you technical questions around the product, the service, the idea that you're considering. If you've got individuals who are more, managing directors, CEO, big picture, they're going to be asking questions around revenue, where it's going, the processes that are in place. You've got financial directors, they're going to be asking about money. So firstly, we've got to understand who's in the room, and more importantly, if they were in the room, what might be types of questions that we can expect. So realistically, you've got to play devil's advocate, and you've got to ask yourself, what would be a tough question that somebody might ask me, and how would I respond to that question? So you've got to actually think about a response if somebody says, Mark, it's all great, but your services are too expensive. Okay, so when somebody says something like that, instead of my response going, no, it's not, we're great, the reality is that person is basically saying is, I don't see the value of this product or service or idea that you've basically positioned. And so you've got to ask yourself is, you've got to go, well, I've got to be able to demonstrate where the value of this idea is. Like, how much revenue can it bring? How much cost saving will it allow? Is it a cash flow issue? Is it a long-term investment? We need to know all of these things. We need to think about all these answers in terms of things. So number one is prep who's in the room. Number two, begin to think about some of these challenging questions and start to come up with some responses on how you can answer those questions. Even more important is if you can come up with some actual facts and figures to back up your responses. Thirdly, we've got to realize that sometimes somebody's going to throw us an absolute curveball of a question. And if we don't know the answer, do not lie. That's the cardinal sin. If somebody catches you lying, you will immediately lose credibility, and it's nigh impossible to be able to come back from that. This person, you've lost their trust, and you're going to have to work a million times harder to get that trust back. But here's also the challenge. You can't keep responding to a whole bunch of questions with, I don't know, I'll need to get back to you. That shows me that you've not prepared accordingly, and that means that I've also lost credibility and you've lost my trust as an organization or an individual whose ideas I want to start to consider. So, we've got to prep who's in the room. We've got to think about difficult questions, but we've got to think about how we're going to respond to those difficult questions by coming up with some facts and figures, or at least a clear and succinct response to that. Now, if we're thrown under the bus, don't lie. And also, if you want to give yourself some time, when somebody's given you a really, really, really challenging question, one of the get out of jail cards is you have a glass of water that you can take a sip on. So it gives you a few seconds to think about your response. Secondly, you can ask them to repeat the question. You can only ask that once, maybe twice at the most. And your third get out of jail card is you start to paraphrase the question. So, yeah, okay, so Mark, your programs are too expensive. Okay, so this is a question around the value of what we're doing. Here at C4S, we're able to demonstrate our value through our Net Promoter Score. Over 96.2% of the people that we work with recommend our programs to other people. That's how good we are. So that shows you that we deliver a tangible return of investment for those that we work with. And that's why we charge what we charge, is because you see the value as a result. So we need to know how we can respond to these types of important questions. So yeah, as leaders, we've got to prep more. We've got to think about the responses we need to deliver on. We need to practice those responses because we're going to be put under pressure. And when we're not prepared, we all tend to buckle. And there's nothing like somebody delivering an incredible pitch and then it all falls to the wayside because they've not handled Q&A effectively. Start to do that and you can start to transform your organization. Also, if you're an organization that recognizes that your senior leaders really need to take their communication to the next level, and handling Q&A is one part of having powerful executive communication capability. At what we do is we're offering 1 hour executive presence masterclass for your organization at no cost. Now, normally that 1 hour masterclass is worth the value of over $2,000. We're giving to that for free. You might be asking yourself the question, well, why would you want to do that? Well, the reality is we recognize that senior leaders need to buy into a training and a change initiative. And so we are able to do that by running a masterclass at a time and date that suits. We'll be sharing best practice, we'll be sharing research around the why, we'll be giving tips and techniques around how these guys can start to make some changes immediately. It's very interactive, and as a result, it's allowing your organization to get the first step into getting buy-in from your senior leaders to want to look into their executive communication capability. And we find that when we have this approach, it's that level of partnership and buy-in that allows training initiatives to see success. So yeah, if you're an organization that recognizes the importance of developing your senior leadership team's communication capability, because let's be honest, very few leadership teams are equipped to thrive in the current communication challenges we find ourselves in. They're equipped with communication capability of pre-COVID, and we know how much the world has changed since then. So yeah, please drop me a message. Let's reach out and let's explore how we can support you and your wider organization in 2024.